My motto in life is work smarter, not harder. As a creative and entrepreneur who is also a mom, I'm a firm believer in making the process of creating easier for myself, and that is why I absolutely love using shortcuts or hacks in my creative process. Today, I'm going to share 5 hacks in Affinity Designer that I cannot live without. And this video is in collaboration with my creative friend and fellow YouTuber Lauren Lesley. She is sharing her 5 hacks using Illustrator over on her channel. If you are coming from her video, welcome, and for those of you who already follow along, welcome back. I'm Jen, a graphic designer and illustrator based out of the Midwest, and I love sharing helpful art, design, and creative tutorials on my channel. I hope you find these Affinity Designer hacks helpful. Let's get started. Alright, so let's jump into creating this repeating pattern. We're going to be using this adorable vector white tiger that Lauren sent over to me so that I can kind of create something that is similar to what she was making in her tutorial over on her channel. She used Adobe Illustrator, but I'm going to be working in Affinity Designer. I'm going to showcase 5 hacks that are similar to the hacks that she used in Illustrator, but in Affinity Designer. All right, so let's get started. Really quickly, before I start showcasing the hacks, I want to add a background to this to just help you see what we're doing a little bit easier. All right, now that I have that placed, let's start working with this tiger and let's start utilizing some of these hacks. So the first hack that Lauren showcases is the reflect hack. She used the reflect tool. We have a tool that is very similar to this in Affinity Designer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make a copy of the tiger here. You can go to edit, copy, and paste, or you can just do Command C, Command V if you are in a Mac kind of environment, or whatever copy and paste shortcuts you have on your computer if you're working in a PC environment. What's really nice in Affinity Designer, you don't have to do any special action to paste in place. It automatically pastes the new image on your original image. So in order for us to reflect, which is basically like flipping your motif in an opposite direction, you have a couple of options here. So in this case, we're just gonna flip this and reflect it on the horizontal axis, which means it'll turn it from facing left to facing right. And if you look in the upper middle, but closer to the right hand side of our menu options here, like you have your main menu up top and then you have these other icons. If we select this icon that's right to the right of the name of the file, it looks like these triangles that are split in half. So the first one is flip vertical, the first one is flip horizontal, the second is flip vertical. You can also rotate counterclockwise and clockwise. You can also right click and you'll be able to access those same options under your transform selection here, and you'll be able to rotate left, rotate right, flip horizontal, and flip vertical. So flip will be the option that you'll want to select to reflect your motif. So we're going to select flip horizontal and it's going to flip it to the right. So once I've done that, I'm going to move this tiger to the right. I'm going to drag it to the right, and I have a quick shortcut that you can utilize to keep things on the same plane. Hold shift and it'll stay in line with the original image that you used, or the middle, like the center of your artboard. So I'm going to adjust the placement of this tiger so that the tails are touching, and I like to use the shortcuts here or right click, but you can also access those same kind of reflection options if you go into your main menu, select layer, and then scroll down to transform, and then you'll get that flip horizontal, flip vertical, rotate left, rotate right. Now I want to make sure that these 2 lines are aligned towards the bottom. That's the next hack that we're going to look at. The align tools are some of my prioritized go-to options when I'm designing in Affinity. It just helps to line things up precisely. It's very helpful when I'm placing different elements on my artboard or when I have to line things up with other things. It's just a really, really useful tool. So I'm gonna select this black arrow tool. I'm gonna drag over both of the lines, and if we zoom in, they are not aligned at the bottom. One is a bit higher than the other. You can also see that in the tail. So we can utilize our align functions in the center menu. Again, right underneath where it says untitled, you'll see these additional options. You have these shortcuts for align left, align center, align right, align top, align the middle, and align bottom. But then if you also select this alignment pop out here that's right next to those reflect tools and the rotation tools, you'll get a whole bunch of different options. You can align horizontally and you can align vertically, and you'll be able to distribute things as well as align them to the top, middle, and bottom. So in this case, we want to align vertically at the bottom, so I'm going to tap that, and then you'll see that the tigers pop down, and then in order to keep that, we hit apply and it'll save the change. So now that I have those aligned and I think their placement works really well, with both of them selected, I'm going to right click and then I'm going to hit group, and it's going to group them together so that way they move as one, and we don't have to worry about messing up the alignment or the placement or anything like that. I like to group my layers just to kind of keep things organized. You could also go into your layers on the right hand side, and you'll see where my group folder is, and I like to rename those just to keep things organized in the off chance that maybe I'm selling this for licensing, or I'm selling it on a graphics asset website or something like that. It's just nice to keep your files organized, and it makes them a little bit easier to use. So I'm going to rename this Tiger Motif 1. Now I want to adjust where I place these on my artboard and start building out the repeat. So a rule of thumb to keep in mind is that whatever you put on top of your artboard has to go in the exact same place on the bottom. Whatever you put on the right has to go in the exact same place on the left of your artboard. And that's what helps to create that seamless effect. So I'm just going to start in the corner over here, and I'm going to adjust my placement, and then whatever I put on this corner, I'm going to want to put on the right hand corner. So whatever I put on the left corner, I'm going to want to put on the right hand corner. And that takes us to our next hack or tool that I really like to use, which is our transform tool. So in Lauren's video, she highlights it as the move tool. We use the transform options in Affinity Designer. So I'm going to place my tigers where I want them, and then I'm going to hit Command C for copy, or just go up to edit and select copy, and then you can go into edit and select paste, or hit Command V to paste it in place. So now that it's placed in place, what we need to do is move it to the right hand side, so the right corner. We're going to utilize the transform option. So if you look on the right hand side here, I have all of these additional options and studio menus. I'm going to select transform. If you don't have this transform option here, you can go into your window and scroll down to transform so that you can make sure it's check marked, and it'll come up in your options here on the right hand side. Now, my artboard is 4,000 by 4,000 square pixels. What we are doing is essentially moving this set of icons from the left to the right, so we will be moving on our x-axis. If we were moving from the top to the bottom, we would be moving on our y-axis. So these are the areas that you want to keep in mind, your x and your y. We are moving from left to right. We're going to be moving on our x-axis. So we want to select where our x-axis is, and what those numbers are is essentially if you had a grid board and you were marking your coordinates, that is the exact coordinates that we are on within this artboard. So we're going to tap on our x coordinates, and we're going to select the plus sign because we're moving from left to right. If we were moving from the right side of the board to the left, we would select negative. If you're moving from the top to the bottom, you would hit plus, and if you're moving from the bottom to the top, you would hit negative. And then what we're going to type in is 4,000 because that is the size of our artboard. So you're going to X, hit plus 4,000, and then hit enter, and it's going to move your motif right to the exact spot that you need it. Now I'm going to hit copy again and paste, and I'm going to move the next set of tigers over to the center of these two sets. And I have magnetics turned on. If you notice on my screen here, you see a bunch of red lines popping up. So that's essentially telling me that these three sets of icons are aligned at the top and the bottom, and it just makes placement a little bit easier. But say you want to do something, some like very like detailed maneuvering, you might want to turn that magnetics off. It's called snapping here in Affinity Designer. So in this upper menu here with these icons, to the right of where the alignment tools are, you'll find a little magnet. If you click on it, it'll turn it off, and if you click on it again and it's darkened, it'll turn it on. So magnetics helps me a lot. I like to utilize that, but then of course you can always use your align functions. So now that I know this is placed exactly where it needs to be on my right hand sides, I can start to build out the bottom portion of this, because whatever we put up top has to be placed on the bottom. Before we do that though, I want to make sure that all of these are aligned and spaced evenly. So I'm going to select that black arrow tool, our move tool, and then I'm going to drag over all 3 of our motifs. And if we zoom in a bit, you'll see that the placement between the left set of tigers and the right set of tigers and this middle set, it's off just a little bit. I want to make sure that they're evenly placed. So we can go back to that align menu, and I'm going to tap on it, and what I want to do this time is align horizontally, and we want to distribute the set of icons evenly. So what you would select in this case is space horizontally. So when we tap that, it moves that middle set so that it's equally distanced between each set of motifs on its left and right side. And then you're going to hit apply, and now we know that this is placed perfectly and everything is in repeat. So what we can do now is right click and group this set together. We can lock it as is, or we can just move it around a bit if we want to. It's okay if you move it around, because the way we've placed our elements, they're already exactly in alignment. So you can move around the set till you get exactly what you want. I think I like this with the 2 in the center, and then I can kind of copy and paste and move around some additional ones to create some interesting looking kind of like offset rows. So once I've placed it exactly where I want it, I'm going to go into that group setting, I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to go into my layers, and I'm going to right click the layers, and then I'm going to lock it so it doesn't move. That way we don't have to worry about something getting messed up or accidentally moving it when we're fiddling with the rest of the design. And the reason why I copied it was so that I can paste the next set on top and move it to the bottom. Now I'm going to paste the new set, so Command V, or you can go into Edit and Paste. So what we want to do is go back to that transform tool, and we'll want to move this set of tigers from the top to the bottom so it matches exactly in the placement that we need it. To do that, we're going to go into our transform options here. We're going to go into our Y axis because we're moving from top to bottom, and we'll want to select plus, and then we're going to type in 4000 because that's the size of our workspace here, our artboard, and then we're going to hit enter. Now that we have that done, we can start to fill out the rest of the artboard. Because we have already created this original file in repeat, we don't have to worry about the right and left side because we already ensured that that was taken care of when we aligned that left corner with the right corner. So now all we have to do is copy and paste these motifs and start to place them. Alright, once I've placed all of my additional copies, I'm going to go back into my layer groups. I'm going to unlock that first one so that I can select everything, and then I want to make sure that these are evenly distributed. I'm going to go into that alignment function again, and then I want to go to align vertically, and I want to space vertically, and it should evenly space all of these rows, and then I'm going to hit apply. So basically our repeat is essentially done, but what we want to do is kind of make this package a little bit more organized and neat to use, say if we're sending it off to a client, and just so that it's easier to use when you're exporting. Lauren does something first, which she utilizes kind of like a clipping mask to trim around her edges to get rid of this extra artwork that isn't needed, and then she goes into recoloring. But for us, because we're working in Affinity Designer, the recolor options aren't as robust as Illustrator, so we have to do things a little bit different. So we're going to jump into recoloring first. So that is our next hack. I really like to utilize some tools to help with recoloring. In Lauren's case, she utilizes the magic wand tool, and we have access to something like that. If we go into our pixel persona, we have all of these different selection tools, like your marquee tool, freehand select tool. We also have a magic wand. In our case, it's called the flood select tool, and she uses that in her case in Illustrator to select colors. And we could do that here, but I find that the selection isn't as precise. So what I like to do instead, and the reason why you have to do your recoloring options first, is because it needs to stay in vector format so that we have access to something that we could always go back to edit. And then I'm going to copy, you can right click and copy that whole entire layer group, right click and paste. And then I'm going to select that original layer group, and there's a little button on the right hand side, and that allows you to toggle your visibility. So I like to always have a copy of something that I can go back to and edit if need be in the future. To turn this off though, so that we can just work on the copy, you're gonna tap on that little gray button. Now, what we want to do to recolor, we have to recolor first before we finalize the file. What we'll do is, instead of using the magic wand tool, we are going to use our selection tools. So what we can do is drop down that group copy and then just open up by tapping on that little caret so that it points downward to any of these motifs, so that we can get to the actual elements of the motifs, the different curves. So what you want to do is select a curve in the color that you want to change. So I want to change all of these like black stripes to something a little bit more similar to that tannish brown background, but maybe make it a little bit darker. So I'm going to select that curve that is black in this first group layer, and then I'm going to go into our menu options here, and I'm going to tap on select, and I'm going to scroll down to where it says select same, and then I'm going to select fill color, and it'll select everything that has that same fill color. You could also select stroke, fill in stroke color. You can select everything that has the same stroke weight or transparency, shape, blend mode, things like that. But I'm just going to select fill color. And now when we look at the layers, everything that is in black in all of our groupings here will be selected. And then what we can do is go into our color swatches and we can update the color. You can also update the colors using your color picker tool. It's all the way towards the bottom, and you can pick up, say, the color from the background. But in that case, it's going to make it kind of hard to see. So I'm going to stick with that dark brown, but you can utilize your color picker tool as well. So once we've done that, what we're going to do is clean this up so that we get rid of all of this extra line work on the outside of the file. Lauren utilizes the Pathfinder tool a lot for this. What I have in Affinity Designer is kind of similar, but it's called geometry. But the issue with geometry is that it really doesn't work too well when you're using very detailed vectors. So that makes it really complicated to utilize our geometry tool. But I'm going to show you how it works first before we do the actual trim. So I'm going to turn off this grouping, and then I'm just going to create a new shape using my shape tool. Right now I have it set to a star, but if you press and hold, you'll get all of these additional options. So I'm going to create a star. And with the geometry tool, you can trim off and kind of intersect and divide different shapes with other shapes. So I'm going to select my move tool. I'm going to highlight both the background rectangle and the star. We'll go into our menu, select layer, and then scroll down to geometry. You get all of these additional options where you could add to shapes, subtract, intersect. We also have the shape builder tool where you're able to create additional shapes, but again, it's not as precise or clean when we are working with those very big vectors. But what we're going to do is go into our layers and go into geometry, and we're going to subtract, and it's going to delete that top shape from the background behind it. Say I wanted to create a specific shape within the star that I don't have an exact replica of, I can take another shape and combine those shapes as well. And I can select that shape, hold shift, select my star, right click, go into geometry, and we can select add, and it will add that specific shape to the other shape to create a shape, a new shape with those two shapes. So alright, so that is the geometry function, which is really similar to Pathfinder, but like I said, it can be difficult to work with when you're using complex vector shapes. So I'm going to delete this off my screen here. I'm going to go back to my original design here, and then we can work on clipping this. So she utilizes a clipping mask. We do have access to clipping masks. What I'm going to do is select my rectangle background, and I'm going to copy it, and then I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to drag that layer so that it goes right above our grouping of our design. And I do this because what we're going to do is mask to below. So we're going to right click that layer, and we're going to select mask to below, and it's going to mask so that our set of tigers are nicely housed within the tile that we're creating. And the problem though is sometimes it can get tricky, file sizes can get big, so the best way to deal with that usually is to trim all of the excess of the artwork that goes outside of your artboard. So because we masked doesn't mean that we got rid of those extra lines and things like that. So what we'll want to do then, and this could be considered one of the cons, but personally I don't always trim final designs. Masking them seems fine enough, but if you have to optimize things for file size, things like that, some designers opt to do the trimming, and you can do that relatively easy with Pathfinder tools in Illustrator, and you can't really do that in Affinity Designer. But by no means do I think that that is a reason that Illustrator is any better than, say, Affinity Designer. But again, I think it's really designer preference. So if you want to trim though, and this is why I make a copy, it's because the process that we're going to have to do in order to trim is destructive. We are going to have to rasterize this final set of tigers. So what I do is I will go into the drop down menu of that masking. We'll select that little caret, make sure it faces down, and then I'm going to tap on the rectangle mask, hold shift, and tap on the last row of tigers, and then I'm going to right click, and I'm going to select rasterize and trim. And what that does is just remove all of the excess line work outside of your artboard, and this little tile here that I'm moving around is your final repeat pattern. So, and I'm just going to export this tile as is just so that we can test it really quickly. So I'm going to select File, Export. I'm going to select whole document. You can export as a JPEG or a PNG, and then I'm going to hit export, and then I'm going to save it in a file for easy access. And then I'm going to go in and create a shape, a square that goes across my artboard here. And I'm going to utilize the fill tool. And what's nice is the fill tool will allow you to fill different types of fills. You can fill solid colors, gradients, and also you can select bitmap, which will allow you to fill a pattern. So once we hit that fill tool, if you look to the upper left hand corner, you can see a context and a type. You'll want to keep your context the same. You want to keep it as a fill, and then you're going to change your type from solid to bitmap, and then you're going to find your tile that you created and hit open, and it's going to place it inside of your shape. You'll have these two arms, which allows you to rotate and adjust the placement of your pattern. So basically, I kind of scale down just to make sure there's no weird seams and that everything fits and works well. So that is it. Those are all of the tips for today, the hacks that I find make creating surface pattern repeats an really in general, any kind of design work that I do, it makes it so much easier. And that is it for my 5 must-know hacks in Affinity Designer. As I mentioned earlier, this video is in collaboration with my creative friend and fellow YouTuber Lauren Lesley. She's a fellow surface pattern designer and textile designer. She's sharing 5 hacks similar to the ones that I shared today, but in Illustrator. So if you are trying to decide whether you want to opt for Adobe, which is industry standard, or go for Affinity, which is a great alternative, definitely check out her video. Illustrator is a part of the Adobe Creative Suite, which is on a subscription model, but it's often used in most creative jobs. I know the software well myself, but I decided to go the Affinity route about 4, almost 5 years ago now. I find that it's a great alternative to Illustrator. What I personally like most about Affinity though is that they have all of their desktop software as iPad apps, and it makes it really seamless when you're working on the go. I can work in my office on my bigger desktop or on my laptop, or I can take my iPad and transfer those same files and still be able to work on it just as easily as I would if I was in my office. I would absolutely suggest you test both the Adobe and Affinity software out before you decide to take the leap and make a purchase though. Thanks so much to Lauren for working with me on this collab. I hope you all found this video helpful and that these hacks make your creative process so much more streamlined and easier. I will see you in the next one. Bye!